Today, on Different Facets of Happiness, I'm joined by Dr. Avram Weiss, an internationally recognized psychotherapist, teacher, and author of four powerful books: Hidden in Plain Sight, Living and Loving Mutually, Change Happens, and Experiential Psychotherapy. Dr. Weiss is known for his groundbreaking work on male emotional development and relationship dynamics. In this episode, we explore why many men shut down in relationships, the hidden fears they carry, and what true emotional connection really looks like. Let's dive in. So, Dr. Weiss, thank you so much for joining and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Glad to have you here. My first question to you is, and I'm just going to dive right in.
Go for it.
Why do men get so emotionally withdrawn? I should say some men get emotionally withdrawn in arguments.
You jumped right in and you jumped into a very helpful place because this is a pattern that occurs far too often in heterosexual couples where women pursue emotionally and men withdraw, women then pursue more, men withdraw. And so the argument escalates. And then the couple sort of, you say to them later, like, what was the fight about? And they're like, I have no idea. It's sort of a puzzle to them. So the critical thing to understanding that, I think that where my understanding of it differs from, say, mainstream understanding is most people will tell you that men are withdrawing as a part of a power struggle. That since they're not in charge, and they're used to being in charge in the world at large, being privileged and being powerful, and they don't feel that way in their intimate relationships, that withdrawal is sort of the power of the oppressed, right? If I can't have overt power, then covertly I can take my power by withdrawing. And while I certainly think there's truth to that, I think it misses a really important element. And that element, as I understand it, is that men are often not as comfortable or practiced in their own emotional life as women are. And I'm happy to give you the story and how it gets
Yeah,
that way
please.
if you're interested.
Because also I was going to ask you, are they, because it seems then they're hypersensitive to criticism. Are they?
Absolutely. The number one thing I hear from men in my office more than anything else is I feel criticized. So let me sort of finish walking through it, and
Sure.
then we'll go back and talk about how it gets there, and then we can talk about criticism. But you help me track, if you would.
Yes, of course.
Boys and girls tend to play together in mixed gender play groups until around school time. I mean like till around 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the research is pretty clear that boys have friendships with other boys that are as close and as important to them as girls' friendships with other girls, which you might not know looking at grown men. That's certainly not the case among men and women. So then they tend to split by gender, with girls playing with girls, boys playing with boys. So what kind of games do girls play?
Well, I'm not the typical girl, so I didn't play, I guess, typical girly things, but I used to play with cars. And some girls, I was a bit of a tomboy. Some girls, I'm sure, play with toys, I guess, dolls,
Exactly.
right? But yes,
And they play fantasy games about relationships.
yes.
They play school, they play doctor, they play family. All of those are games in which they are actually learning about how relationships work.
Uh-huh.
Now, of course, they're also being socialized to be moms and
Right,
wives and
right,
all that, but
right.
they're learning a lot of important skills. Boys go off and play games to prepare them for what they're expected to be in the world. They play games focusing on competition and aggression.
Yes, very true.
We played a lot of sports. We played cops and robbers. I'm going to catch you and lock you up. We played a lot of games that were hierarchical and competitive. Okay. So we're separated and learning very different things. Now, puberty comes. Boys are interested in girls again. What have been sort of like cooties, now we're interested again for
Right.
straight guys. But we're at a significant disadvantage because you've, for 10 or more years, been practicing and learning about relationships. Men have not. So we enter into an arena. To guys, I describe it as an away game. It's not a home game. It's an away game, right?
Yeah.
The field's tilted. Refs are biased. You don't know the rules, and you don't know how the game's played. And most importantly, you don't know the rules.
Ah, I see.
So you feel a little intimidated and inadequate, which is not a feeling you're accustomed to.
Ah. So is that why then some men are afraid of women?
Absolutely. Because men have been functioning in a system in which they were privileged and powerful and now enter into intimate relationships in which they feel not only not powerful, but sort of clueless. Like, what is she talking about? So, two important things happen. One is, so I'm going all the way back now to your original question, why do men withdraw? The main reason men withdraw is that when women get more emotional because they're comfortable with their own feelings, men are not. And so they don't know a lot about how to manage their own emotions. So since they don't, emotions are contagious, right?
Mm,
If you're with somebody who's anxious, you start to get anxious.
yes.
So you're with a woman who's full of feeling, you start to get a lot of emotions, which you don't like and don't know what to do with. And you don't know how to manage. What's the last strategy? I'll just withdraw, just take my ball and go home. So I'll try to lower the emotional temperature of the whole relationship, which is why men say things to women like, just be rational. Just
Right.
keep your feelings out of it. Just talk to me, just sensibly. Not because they're so much trying to control women, but trying to manage themselves and the emotion. So they look rational and controlled, but underneath is a furnace of emotions that they don't know how to manage.
And that irritates women, and that's why I'm assuming why women and men keep on having the same arguments over and over and over again.
That's why it escalates because thank you, you're making a very important point. Why are women instigating these conversations? To get closer. But now back to your question about criticism.
Yeah,
Men are socialized to believe that they're responsible for women,
true,
physically,
true. We have the
financially.
expectation exactly, they're the provider.
So if you're not happy, I'm failing.
Yeah.
You're saying so sometimes a woman will say something like, Bob and Mary down the street, they have date night every night. They go out together all the time, and that just seems so nice. I wish we spent more together time together. She here is thinking overture. I'm trying to make a connection. He hears, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. I'm not taking my wife out enough. I better arrange something special quick, or I'm in the doghouse. Which is an interesting expression, by the way, of which there is no equivalent for women. You never hear women say, "I'm in the doghouse,"
That's
right?
that's so
Have
true.
have you seen the meme that went around? I think it was Procter& and Gamble put it out about the guy who buys his wife a vacuum cleaner for their
No,
anniversary?
no, oh, no.
So for your listeners, look it up. I think
Okay,
it's called the doghouse. I think you'll find it
okay.
that way.
Oh, that's gonna be
So it's their anniversary, and he's so excited because he got her, like, the state of the art dual this and that. She literally takes him by the ear, marches him outside, points to the doghouse, and he goes down a chute into the doghouse where there is an entire room full of men who have done similarly dumbass things and who are working off. And then every once in a while, you go before the parole board and they're like,
yeah.
no, I still don't think you get it. It's very funny.
Is the parole board a group of women?
Of course. Of course.
Too funny. But
And the
you know
men
what?
are like, so what'd you do to get here? Oh, yeah. It's hilarious.
Well, you know what? Because you talked about the vacuum, and I guess there's a sense of traditional masculinity discouraging men from that emotional fluency. How do men, or how do we as women help men to rewire that, or can we?
I don't think that's up to women. I think that's men. I'm old enough to have been around for the beginnings of feminism in this country. And that was a very important part of the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s was that men could go off and do their work, but it wasn't up to men to help women. It was up to women to do work with other women. And so I would just reverse that and say, one of the things I've learned doing this work is how well men work with each other. So I've been doing psychotherapy groups for over 50 years,
Mhm.
and I've done mixed groups until the last 15 years. And in mixed groups of men and women, men tend to trail behind. Women set the emotional lead in most groups, and men sort of learn as they go and come along. In men's groups, men are far more open and vulnerable with each other than I have ever seen them in mixed groups
Why is that?
because they're scared of women and there aren't any women in the room.
So is it fear or is it a fear of inadequacy?
Yes, and what you learn when you're in a room alone with men is that the stereotypes about men not being interested in connection and vulnerability and intimacy are absolutely not true. They're an expression of men's fears of being inadequate, as you say, but that when you put men in a situation in which there is an opportunity to be close and to connect with other men, they are very eager and very involved. My groups with men, the guys sit there and look at each other and talk about how important they are to each other, how much they care about each other, how much they love each other. It's an extraordinary thing for any woman to see.
Wow. So, in your experience, what's the single most, I'd say, misunderstanding that people have about males and the relationships with women?
That a lot of the behavior that they're critical of men is based on fear.
Yeah.
It's based on them being afraid. In the book, I talk about, it's been a while, I think it's 7 different levels of fears of women, some of which are sort of more socially visible and recognizable, and others of which are more deep-seated and unconscious. So the more recognizable one that most people will recognize immediately are, for example, men are afraid of being dominated and controlled by women.
Okay.
The original title I wanted for the book, but was probably wisely ruled out, is I wanted to call the book Pussy Whipped
Oh,
because I think it's fascinating that the worst thing that one man can say to another man is that he's controlled by a woman, or more precisely, if you think about it, controlled by his need for a woman. So that's the worst insult from a man, is to say, "You need women."
but the inference there with that title is women almost dominate men.
Yes, men, that's what men are afraid of. So that they don't feel adequate, they don't feel powerful in their relationships, and so they imagine that their partners are, and I stress the word imagine, are trying to control them. So, for example, one of the stories that I like to tell is, and any man recognizes this story. You're at work and a group of your buddies come up to after and say, "Hey, we're gonna go to a bar and watch the game tonight. Do you wanna join us?" Then I'll ask men, "What's the first thought that comes to your mind?" Do you have any idea?
Yeah. Oh, I gotta talk to my wife or my girlfriend
Right,
or see what they say. Yeah.
right. But then you talk to the wife or the girlfriend, and she says, "Oh my god, why are you calling me? I've been begging you to go out with your
Yep.
friends." Right? So it's not that the woman is trying to control him. I'm not blaming women here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is this is in their own head. This is their own fears about, she's never asked him to call. She's never expressed any reluctance from this. She's been begging him to spend time with friends, and yet he acts like a little boy and feels like he has to check with his mommy before he goes out with friends.
But like you said, the reverse, the partner, the wife, the girlfriend's thinking, well, why wouldn't he have approached me and asked me out?
Right. Right.
Absolutely. So why then? Because I'm getting that some men feel isolated, right?
Totally.
But why? Why? How does that trigger that when, based on what we just talked about, a woman feels, almost
Sure.
isolated as well?
I can give you a why, but let me give you first some data to support what you're saying.
Okay.
I write for psychologytoday.com.
Yeah.
The most read article I have ever written was about men's loneliness, which has been read over 1,000,000 times. So it strikes, and what I'm curious about and don't know is who's reading it? Is it men or women who are reading it?
I think it's men.
Well, overall, my articles are read slightly more often by women.
Ah, why is that?
I think men are opaque to women. So if you go into any bookstore, you will find at least one shelf of books written for women about men, trying to explain men to women. Unfortunately, they're mostly written by women. It'd be better if
Mhm.
they were written by men, because I think women want to know their partners better and are sort of frustrated that they feel like they don't understand what a lot of couples have told me they've done with my book, which I love,
Yeah.
is they're reading it together one chapter at a time. Like, they don't go to chapter 2 until they've both read chapter 1 and made time to talk about it. And a lot of what happens is the guys are saying, yeah, that's what I've been trying to say. That's how I feel. And the women are like, what? That how could it's a complete, it's like traveling to Peru for them. It's
Yeah.
like they don't know the culture, they don't know the language, they don't know what to eat. It's all a mystery. So the book is helpful to couples as a translation almost.
Ah. So in your work with men, have you noticed any generational shifts, I'll say, and
It's
how
a
they
great question.
yeah,
I don't think I answered your previous question. Let me go back to the one about
yeah,
how did men get isolated,
yes.
and then help me remember to come because that's a great
Okay.
question.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data yet, but I have my own anecdotal experience.
Okay.
So the way men get isolated, so remember, girls and boys play together, then they split up.
Right.
At that time, dads typically enter the picture. Dads are often or traditionally have not been as involved with children until they're sort of old enough to play golf, right?
Some dads, traditionally, you're right, because
Traditionally.
right.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna talk about that in a minute,
Generational.
the
Okay. All right.
generational stuff. But for now, traditionally. So when dads come to the picture, they offer to their sons access to the world of male privilege and power.
Mm.
I'm a man, you're a man, or you'll be a man, and you can, through your masculinity, have access to earning more, being more powerful, da 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 da. And men have, again, in a traditional family, if the mom is staying home and the dad's leaving, dad's clearly more connected to the world outside the family and just visually gets up and leaves every morning.
Yeah.
That's changing too with people working online.
Right.
But assuming again, and so, but the choice presented is a horrible choice from which men do not recover their entire lives. Because in our culture, there's an issue. If you want to learn more about this, you would Google the term fragile masculinity. In our culture, women say things like, I'm female. I was born female. No, I'm female. I'm not confused about being female. I didn't have to earn being female. I just am. Men will say, I am male only as long as I prove it and defend it.
Mm.
Because we define masculinity not as a proactive thing, but as a
React.
reaction.
Yeah.
It's masculinity is defined as not feminine. So men feel like they have to spend their lives not doing anything. It's sort of like gay kids, have to always watch and make sure they don't do anything gay.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask you about that because how does and I know that we're gonna talk about the generational, but this is another question for you to think about. How does this impact or yeah, impact gay men?
It's very similar. I mean, that one of the book jacket quotes that I was very touched by is from a dear friend of mine who's a gay man and said, I assumed my whole life that I was the only one as a gay kid who didn't understand how it worked and what masculinity was about. But then I read your book and realized the straight kids were right there with me with their noses pressed up against the no, we were in it together. And I just assumed I was all on my own.
Ah,
That's interesting.
okay. Okay. Wow. So let's
So
go
the ch
yeah,
so
go
let
ahead.
me just end that.
Yeah.
So the choice for guys is whether to take the path of privilege and power and masculinity, but because that means foregoing anything feminine, tenderness, intimacy, vulnerability, warmth, passion are all in our culture associated with the feminine, so that it's a forced choice. If you want one, you have to give up the other. And so you have to give up your friends, you have to give up closeness, you have to act like you don't need people. And that's why men end up so isolated.
See, okay. Okay.
Horrible.
It is horrible. Some men, right? This applies to some men. Yeah, okay.
And it is changing. So we could go to your generational question.
Perfect. Okay. So again, my generational question was, have you noticed any generational shifts and how they relate to fear and vulnerability?
I want to be optimistic in answering, but with a slight note of skepticism.
Okay.
In my personal experience, it seems like it's clearly changing. My son has 3 young children, and when I go to visit them, it is very clear that not only in his family, but that in other families, when they get together with a group of friends, and a kid starts fussing, it's actually more likely that the dad is one to get up. And that never happened when I was raising kids. When I was raising kids, there was an old joke. What do you call a dad in a park on a Saturday with his kids?
What do you call him?
Divorced. Because there weren't dads in the park with their kids on
Gee,
Saturdays unless they were divorced. I remember bursting into tears the first time I went to a McDonald's and saw, almost tearful right now, first time I saw a changing room in a fast food restaurant, in the bathroom of a fast food restaurant. I'd never seen one. I'd been changing my kids' diapers on nasty fast food bathroom sinks
yeah,
because nobody thought that I would need a changing table.
right. Isn't that something?
That's one generation ago.
Wow.
And my son's 38. So that's one generation ago. And now, if you didn't have a changing table in your men's room, there would be picketers outside. So sure looks like things are changing, but they're hard to change. If you look at the data about how decisions are made in the family, interestingly, the most egalitarian age group in couples, my generation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Younger people are less egalitarian than my generation. So that's not so encouraging. I think that is it just takes you a few decades to figure this stuff out. And I think when they get to be my age, they're more egalitarian now than I was. And I think when they get older, they'll be. So I do think things are changing, but I think most young couples would tell you that they're really disappointed at how hard it is to actually do.
Do what specifically? Do
To have a more egalitarian, fair
yeah.
distribution. So the litmus test in any family that I always ask a couple, when you have a kid who's sick and needs to stay home, how do you decide who stays home with them?
Yes. Yes. Yes, very true. But women have this tendency when it comes to their kids, some women, I'll say, they're the nurturers. They want to take care, their child is sick in the middle of the night. They hear everything instantly. It's 24/7. It isn't shut off. But you're right. There's a gradual shift with some parents where men are stepping in and doing those things. And actually why is it that women are the ones that are always doing things? Women shouldn't be the ones always preparing dinner, right? You get to the stage saying, "Sorry,
Right.
it's not just
Well,
me."
well, you've talked about the positive side of it, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about the shadow side of it.
Okay, okay, let's talk about it.
So I've been interviewing women. So an interesting question came up in some teaching I was doing. And I started asking women the question, what did you learn about men from your mother? The other reason for with the dynamics you just described is that women are taught to not trust men.
Uh-oh, I may be in trouble.
You can own as much or little of it as you want. I'm not asking.
Okay.
But women are trained that men are not really competent parents. And so they can help, but you shouldn't leave your kids alone with that.
So you're telling me it's my mother's fault? I hope you're not.
Oh, her mother and her mother's, who knows how long this has been going on. And of course, the things that mothers teach their daughters are all based in fact because they're teaching their daughters to try to help them avoid the disappointments they've had and because they hope that their husband would be more involved and he wasn't. And so, but it carries on. And then it happens in younger couples and they don't understand where it's coming from. And I'm like, ask your mother. Ask your mother what she told you about men, and you'll understand a lot more about where it's coming from. And so what I say to guys is, which they always look at me like I've lost my mind,
Yes.
they say, "You should be the one to get up in the middle of the night as often as possible." They're like, "Well, I gotta" I'm like, "The middle of the night is the only unsupervised time you will have with your children. And that's how you learn to be confident as a father is by getting up in the middle of the night."
True. Very, very true. Let's just pivot for a second because I know you've worked with a lot of and trained a lot of therapists. What are some of the nonverbal cues therapists or partners look for when a man is emotionally flooded but doesn't really show it?
Well, I think that's a good segue to come back to an earlier question, which was about criticism.
Yes.
I think often what you hear from men is they'll say, "I feel criticized." because that generational ghost is in the room, but it's subtle. And so the man will say, if I'm seeing a couple, the man would say, see right there what she said, that's critical. And I'm like, maybe kind of a little bit, but their response to it is so exaggerated. And so it's that, as you said earlier, it's the withdrawal and the feeling criticism are good signs that you know a man is scared.
Then how do you use body-centered, I should say, or somatic techniques to bypass resistance in therapy sessions?
I don't do a whole lot of that, so I don't have a great answer for you on that, but I can talk about how to help women in those situations.
Okay. Yes.
So the Gottmans have done a lot of research on this, and they have found that they can predict how a marital argument is gonna go, relationship argument is gonna go within the first, I don't know what it is, 3 minutes or something, say what it is. They recommend what they call a slow startup. So again, remember, women are more emotionally fluent by and large. So you know, they're up here and the men are still trying to figure out what's going on. And so if
Yes.
you can help women have a slower startup and to talk more relationally, by which I mean, don't just talk at someone,
Yeah.
but, like, as I'm talking to you now, I'm watching your response, and I know when you're hearing me, when you're not hearing me, what makes sense. I'm changing on the fly as I connect with you. Sometimes people forget to do that, and so they go off, and the man is already withdrawn and scared, and the woman doesn't notice, and she's off and running, so what I try to teach them is go slower, make room for him, match his pace. I tell them that you already know how to do this. If you have sex with each other, you already know how to do this, right? You don't just go off
But there's
on your own
enjoyment in
excitement.
the sex part. There may
Yeah, I mean, but you're paying attention to your partner's
Yes.
pace and
Right.
matching your pace, and you don't just go off and meet your own needs. You're also attentive. So I said, it's just like sex. It's just like sex, but with words.
Yes. But I can see for women, there's a bit of frustration,
Sure.
because you're saying thinking, "My goodness, we've been together for so long. Why don't you naturally know this? Why
Well,
do
you
I?"
got two choices. You got
Yes.
two choices:
What's
partner
that?
with a woman, or help your man learn to be a better partner. That those are the only 2 choices I know of.
True. Very, very.
Or be alone. I'm sorry, there's the third legitimate third choice. But if your goal is to be more close with a partner, then either you're gonna work with the one you got or you're gonna switch them out. That's
You're right. That's absolutely true. So, just a couple more questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
So you've written 4 books and influenced thousands of people. I mean, you're a great influence to me right now as well.
Thank you. I'm
Oh,
very hold on a second, I'll take a second. Thank you. That meant a
you're very
lot.
welcome. And I don't say that to everyone, so
I
thank
got that. I got that. I very much appreciate what you're saying, and I get the directness of it. Thank you.
you. You're welcome. So if your work had a headline or core truth that the world was to remember, what would it be?
Look for the hidden truths. It means I've always written about stuff that seemed obvious to me that my field doesn't talk about. Like Freud and his contemporaries talked about men's fears of women 130 years ago. And then we just completely forgot it for 100. So I'm always interested in, wait a minute, what's that in the corner over there? So 2 books ago, I wrote a book on change in psychotherapy. How could there not be books about change in psychotherapy? That's like not books on accounting and finance. It's like, wait a minute, that's kind of a basic part of the deal. And then I got interested in it because as I got along in my training, I realized I don't really have a model for how this works. I have a lot of techniques, but where's the philosophy of how people change and what helps them change and what gets in the way and how do you assist in that? There's almost nothing written.
Mhm.
So I'm a little oppositional, I guess, but it would be look for the hidden truths, look for the stuff that people aren't talking about.
That would scare some people.
I think you're right. Certainly, this topic scares a lot of people. So I have been in some very interesting conversations with women. So I was at a party when I was working on this book, and I had been reading the research on domestic violence. And in fact, there are hundreds of studies demonstrating that women actually initiate domestic violence more frequently than men. I know. There's the look on your face. So
Yeah.
imagine I'm in a room full of women, mostly lesbian women, and I'm just sort of stupidly saying, "Oh, I've been reading this research." I mean, the next hour, I'm like running for cover. And these are some of my dearest friends. And one of my closest friends said, I said, "Look, this research is based on studies with women. This is not this is not me saying this. This is what women said." And she said to me, "Well, that can't be right."
Yeah.
But that's what women say. So, yeah, there's a lot of pushback on this topic because men do everything they can to not look scared.
Yeah.
So it seems preposterous. Now, men get it right away. Women think I've lost my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
But go ask your partner.
I will.
Say, if your buddies invited you to go out and watch the game afterwards, what would be your first thing you thought of? And I bet you I know what he's going to say.
I know what he's gonna say.
Yeah. And then say, well, why do you think that? Why, since you don't care, why is he worried about what you think about that?
Yeah.
Think about
You know what? You changed my approach with my husband, and it's going to be gradual because I have expectations that I have to work on as well,
it. Uh-huh.
right? And but like you said, it's about the success of the relationship that I
Well,
want.
that's a huge honor. I'm glad to have been some part of that.
Yes.
There's a principle of Jewish ethics, which is fascinating to me, which is that you are responsible for the impact of your words regardless of what your intention was. So if I say good morning and you burst into tears, that's on me.
Yeah.
Now I couldn't have known, but I have to still be responsible for it. I have to care enough about you to what just happened? I'm sorry. What did you think I meant? What That's what that principle means. And so that's what I think we're talking about is caring, not just say, "Well, I said that because it was the truth." Well, that's not enough.
Yeah.
It also has to be caring. It also has to be kind. It also has to be compassion. And it has to be look, when I train therapists, I say, early in their training, they get all excited because they think they figure out the answer.
Mm,
And I'm like, "I'm sorry to break it to you, but anybody can do that." They'll say, "Oh, I know what it is. His mother didn't let him, da, 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 da." I understand. I'm like, "That is of absolutely 0 help." Now you have to figure out a way to get him to understand that in a way that he can understand it. That's what therapy is. Not knowing it,
right.
that's not hard.
Yeah.
Now tell me how you're gonna get him to know it.
Him to know it, him to implement what the learnings. Right.
Yeah. And
Completely.
same thing I would say to you or any other woman, like, I get that you're frustrated. You have a right to be frustrated. We're starting behind on the curve, but I would say most men want to be close to you
Yeah.
and may be behind in the curve, but given a little help, are eager partners in the process.
I have to say this, and thank you for saying that because it's really you've explained it in a very simple way, right? Where it registers and resonates with me and
Yeah,
many people that are watching the show. And I want to like that's part of the learnings I believe in a relationship. You want to grow together. You want to
absolutely.
understand. And there's ebbs and flows in different relationships, but I
Sure.
get exactly what you said. And I also believe what you said too about that statement that said it was a Jewish statement or it was something that repeated in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
I believe in the power of the spoken word as
Yeah.
well. Have to take responsibility for that. I can
Sure.
agree with that 100%. But my final question to you, Dr. Weiss, is about happiness. Some researchers say that happiness is tied to anatomy, and others say it's about love or purpose. But in your decades of working with therapists and working with men and working with some women as well, what's the emotional condition that consistently precedes real happiness?
It's got to be love, connection. I think the research is overwhelming. Loneliness is a bigger factor in early mortality than smoking cigarettes. If you had to choose, if you wanted to be healthy and live long, you had to choose, you'd be better off smoking a pack of cigarettes a day and having close friends and a partner than the other way around.
Mm,
So, the United Kingdom has a cabinet level position for loneliness. Men are horrifically lonely. which means that in heterosexual couples, there's not a lot of closeness because they have to both be
Yeah.
in the picture for there to be a connection and closeness. So I think the single most important thing that we could work on would be connection and attachment, building communities, building places where if you look at all of the shootings that have been going on, you never see someone who's nested in a community. It's not going to happen. You see people who are they're in online communities of crazy people, but they're not connected to other human beings. It's dangerous to our world to have so many people so isolated. We are all at risk, not just them.
Yes. So true. And what about isolation, especially at an older age? Is it not important, like you said, to be completely, nobody wants to be left alone. And I'm sure it extends your life from what I've read and seen when you,
Absolutely.
yes, this has been a fantastic interview. I'd like to thank you so much. I
My
enjoyed
pleasure.
this immensely.
Me
And I'm
too.
hoping that people, when they listen to this, they really implement everything that you said. And of course, go read your books as well.
So one thing I'm very proud of is I always return every email I get within 24 hours. So my email, you can reach me by email on my website, which I assume you'll put in the show notes.
I will.
If you two things. One, if you are interested in reading what I write, sign up for the mailing list and you'll get a free ebook on relationships. But if you have questions, if you're reading the book or just listen to the show and have questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
Thank you for doing that for my audience and everyone that will be listening to this.
My
Again,
pleasure.
Dr. Weiss, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
My pleasure. Enjoy getting to meet you and talking.
Yes, thank you so much. That was Dr. Avram Weiss, respected psychotherapist, author, and expert in the emotional lives of men. If you want to understand yourself or your partner even more deeply, this conversation is a must. Check out his 4 insightful books and grab his free ebook. Links are below. Be sure to like, share, and follow for more real talk on relationships, healing, human connection, and of course, happiness. I'm Jackie Denise. Thank you so much for joining us.